3 a.m. files.
Hello there. Tonight we're stepping into the cold and endless sea, where an old lighthouse stands against the storm, and where something unsettling waits in the dark. But before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel. It really encourages me to bring you more chilling, high-quality stories, not the recycled, mediocre tales you've already heard 100 times. Now, dim the lights, put on your headphones, and let's open the file. Some mysteries don't have dates, they have weather. Ask anyone who works the water and they'll tell you, the sea keeps its own calendar. It remembers storms better than birthdays. It remembers the days that take people away. The day I came up on Grey Marsh Light, the water was flat and the sky was a kind of clean you only get after hard rain. The supply skiff chattered under me like it wanted to be anywhere else. You could smell the rock before you saw it. A sour, iron smell, like wet nails left in a jar. No flag on the rail, no figure at the gallery, no kettle steam in the lamp room window. "You sure they're up there?" My boatman called over the motor. He was a square man with a square jaw and a square way of looking at things. "They're up there," I said, "because that's what you say. Keepers don't just leave, not from a stone like Grey Marsh, 3 miles into rough sea, with nothing around it but birds and the kind of fog that eats sound." We coasted into the lee of the rock. The ladder was there, iron rings set into stone, shiny where hands had worn them smooth, seaweed matted on the lower rungs. The swell hissed and tugged and let go again. We timed it. On the lift, I grabbed the 3rd ring and pulled. Boots, knees, palms. The ladder shivered under me. At the top, the spray had glittered everything with salt. The lighthouse rose from the stone, white paint blistered like old scars, glass of the lamp room blinking coldly at the sun. The door faced me, heavy oak, iron banded, a handle you could hang a man from. I knocked. A polite knock at first, 2 knuckles, and a breath. Grey Marsh Light. Relief. The door didn't care. It gave me an echo and a seagull's insult. I tried the handle. It didn't budge. The old brass key we keep in a leather pouch went in fine, turned fine, felt fine. The bolt slid. The door should have opened. It didn't. That's when I saw the bar. There's a small diamond peephole cut in the door, a working man's fix from a time a boy lost an eye to a bad latch. I put my face to it. Inside, the shadows stacked neatly, the way they do in a tower wound around a spiral stair, and across the inside of the door, in a pair of iron shoes set in the stone, sat the oak bar. Upper, set, tight. They had barred the door from within. Behind me, the boatman cleared his throat. "Well?" "Bars down," I said. He swore softly and looked at the weather like it had betrayed him. "What do you want to do?" "There are ways. There are always ways. Keepers know the tower the way a butcher knows a carcass, where to cut without ruining the good parts." I told him to wait and circled the base to the lee side, where the storm ladder climbs to a maintenance hatch below the gallery. It's a miserable little run of rungs, the kind you use when the sea wants to pull you out of the world. I climbed. The metal sang against my boots. At the hatch, I pulled at a corroded bolt until my shoulder ached. It gave and the hatch side open. Cold air spilled over me, the kind that lives in stone no matter what the sky is doing. "Grey Marsh," I called into the dark. "Dawes, Marin, Cole, those were their names. I knew them as well as I knew my own hands. Shiftmates, cards on calm nights, shared bread when the weather turned bad enough to make you family. Only the tower's breath answered, draft through narrow spaces, the little whistle old buildings make when they want you to think they're asleep. I slid in, belly first, feet searching for the iron spiral. Found it. The hatch clapped shut over my head like a lid. I stood inside the tower, halfway down the spine, with the long bones of stairs curling both up and down around the weight shaft. You can tell when a lighthouse is healthy. You feel it, the clockwork hum, the lens purr, The faint, oily heat of the lamp, the tick and groan of a building that is a machine that is a heart. Greymarsh felt paused. I climbed up first toward the lamp room. If a keeper is in trouble, you secure the light. That's the rule. There are only 7 rules that matter. The others are just details. The deck door opened onto the gallery. Wind licked my face. The glass above me was clean. Through it I could see the lens. A third-order Fresnel, stacked rings of clear fire. The burners were set right. The clockwork weight was 3 turns from bottom, chain taut, governor still. Nothing had broken. Nothing had burned out. Nothing had been left to chance. And still, something was wrong. On the sill was a mug with a ring of cold tea at the bottom. The lip print was dark. There was a tooth mark on the ceramic where someone had bit the edge the way you do when you're listening hard. I wound the mechanism once, twice, just to hear the tick. It obliged, a good sound in a bad room. The lens gave a slow, stately glide. If a ship had been anywhere near, it would have seen us now. All right, I told the tower. Light is good. Down again then, into the warmth that shouldn't have been there. The watchroom was orderly. The log lay open on the desk, pencil laid across it as if someone meant to be right back. Cole's handwriting, a short, square line, 0700, weather calm, swell moderate, wind light easterly, 1200, fog signal intermittent, though visibility fair, 1416, knock from below, no visitors, investigating. Under that, in smaller letters, like an afterthought, lock the door. I touched the page. The pencil left a smudge. Dawes kept the kitchen like a saint keeps a shrine. If the world ended, he would still wipe the stove before stepping outside. His kettle sat cold on the iron, a clean spoon resting beside it. 2 plates on the table, each with a heel of bread. Butter sweated on a dish. A knife lay across it with the edge toward the door. Dawes's little joke. We are not serving anyone today. Another rule not in the book. I called down the stair. Marin, Cole, Dawes. My voice went the length of the spine and came back thinner, the way voices do in a tower. I went down. At the service level, you smell the sea again. The iron door to the oil room was open a slit. A line of oil had crept over the lip to the lip of the threshold and made a slick tear on the stone, the way oil weeps when it's been slopped in a hurry. The spare lamp was in its cradle, clean. The cans were topped. Someone had been careful. On the lowest landing, there's a smaller door that opens to the base where the tower meets the rock. No one uses it unless they have to. It sticks. It holds grudges. The wood swells and wants to become sea again. The iron strap was warm under my palm. I listened. Sometimes the ocean knocks. Not metaphor, not poetry. The sea puts a shoulder to your wall and asks if you remember who is bigger. Night storm, head tide, long swell. You hear it in your bones. This knock was not that. 3 slow raps, measured and calm, came from the far side of that door. Then a pause long enough for a man to consider his life. Then 3 more. I went cold in my hands and hot in my face. Rule 7. Do not answer knocks from below in clear weather. The book doesn't explain that one. The book doesn't explain most of the real rules. I backed up 2 steps, then 5, then turned and put a floor between me and that sound. After a while, the tower sighed. The stone relaxed. The metal cooled under my palm. On the second landing, there's a locker as tall as a man. We keep oilskins there and line and hooks, and the little things that save you from the big things. 1 set of oilskins hung damp. The second set was gone. The third hung neat and dry. There are stories you can tell with coats. 2 men put theirs on. 1 man did not. But the kitchen had 2 plates. The joke knife pointed to the door. Nothing fit how I wanted it to. I went back to the watchroom because that's where time sits in a tower. The log was open to Cole's 1416 entry. Someone had added a thin diagonal line crosswise from corner to corner. Not a word, not a mark I recognized. A warning, a private signal. I touched it. The pencil smear whispered under my skin. And the door. I put my eye to the diamond in the big door again and looked at the bar. You don't set that bar unless you want to keep the world truly out. It sat in its iron shoes like an arm across a sleeper's chest. My hand went to it without asking me. I pressed. The wood didn't move. It didn't even dream of moving. The bar said, "We decided to keep something in or out, or both." I took the log and set it beside the lamp and wound the weight again, and waited for the dark to come and tell me what it wanted. I dozed in the chair with my boots on and my head against the cool curve of the wall. Greymarsh is a drum. It plays whatever touches it. Around midnight, a new note started, low and insisting, the kind you feel at the base of your skull, the foghorn. There was no fog. It sounded once. It sounded twice. On the third, the horn didn't moan exactly. It formed a shape, not a word, not language. The kind of sound that suggests a word and trusts your brain to fill in the rest. I stood with my lantern and went down to the machinery, to the little engine and the air and the bellows that push voice out of metal. All in order, all asleep. The horn called again, and it didn't come from the pipe. It came from the stone, from below, from that low door that doesn't like to be anything but shut. They had locked the big door from within. This door, the mean little one, it was unbolted, just swollen and stubborn and too heavy for a polite man to argue with. Don't be a fool, I told myself, which is something every fool says when the moment comes. Back up the stairs then, because you keep the light, no matter what else. The lens turned obediently. The wick took a careful breath. In the glass I saw my reflection, and behind it, the gallery, and beyond that, only night. Not perfect, not empty, the kind of night that holds its breath. Something in the glass moved counter to the room, a trick, a reflection of the spiral that wasn't there. The eye will make a ghost out of patience. I wrote in the log, 0023, fog signal sounding without cause, knocks from base repeated intermittent, door barred from within at main, all present unaccounted for, all present unaccounted for. That was a joke I didn't mean to make. It sat on the page and made a shape out of me anyway. I made tea because men make tea when something cannot be solved. The kettle sang a small song. The cup warmed my hands without warming anything that mattered. When the wind shifted, you could smell the iron of the rock in the steam. Around 2, the tower settled into the kind of quiet that feels like a polite threat. I walked the stairs again, up and down, touching the posts as I went like I was counting them. On the landing outside the bunk room, a small thing waited. A boot print in dried salt, bare of grit, pointed toward the wall. Not toward the stairs, not toward the door, toward the wall. There is a little panel there. It sits flush. You'd walk past it 100 times and never see it. A service access for the weight shaft. The iron latch had a film of dust on it when I had climbed in earlier. Now there was a clean thumbprint, the kind of print you leave when you're not thinking about anything but leaving a print. I lifted the latch. Inside, the space was a tight throat where the weight runs. It smelled like oil and old rope and the long exhale of the tower's lungs. It should have been empty except for chain. It wasn't. On the inner face, so close my nose almost touched it, someone had scratched words into paint with the tip of a knife. Do not follow the knocks. Under it, in a different hand, not quite as deep, thinner and more afraid, keep the light. There are rules you don't write down. There are rules you write where only someone who needs them will find them. I closed the panel, because a man has to be careful about how much truth he lets in at once. Dawn came the way it does on a rock, all at once and slow, a lie and a promise together. The sky bleached. The sea remembered to be water and not a sheet of black metal. In daylight, it is easy to be brave. I circled the gallery, checked the panes, checked the bolts. On the east side, under the lip, a piece of line had been tied to the rail. The end had been cut clean, not frayed, not torn. Cut. 2 oilskins missing, a line cut, a door barred from within, a kettle set to sing for no one, the horn talking like a man in a dream. The relief boat didn't come. It wasn't supposed to. Greymarsh runs a 2 weeks on, 1 day off rhythm. The men had 4 days left on this run. They had 4 days to write jokes in the butter and sharpen pencils into spears and say the same 3 lies we always tell. I'm fine, I'm not tired, and it's quieter than last season. By the second night, the tower had learned my name. You laugh at that if you've only ever lived in houses. Buildings that are not alive don't insist on things. Greymarsh insisted. The foghorn called when I thought about the bottom door. The lens caught shapes at the edges that were not me and not the sea. Footsteps walked above me when I was in the lamp room. Footsteps walked below when I was at the base. The clockwork took 3 extra teeth on the gear for no reason and then let them go. None of it broke. All of it was wrong. The log became the place I was most afraid to look and the only place I wanted to be. I read back, Cole's neat hand describing weather so like the day I'd had I could feel his breath under the words. Marin's long questions he wrote to himself when he couldn't sleep. Little counts of screws and rivets and wainscot boards, a mind chewing its own tail. Dawes, who didn't write much, penciled one thing at the bottom margin a week ago. If you hear your name from below, it isn't us. On the 3rd sunrise, I found the 2nd mark on the door. Not the big bar. A smaller thing, down near the floor, where a child would look. 3 little X's in a row, carved with something sharp and impatient. They hadn't been there when I first leaned into the peephole. I would swear it. Fresh, pale under the dark varnish. When you run a light, you tell yourself stories about being the last person in the world. It makes the edges less loud. The trick only works if you don't add too many details to your last person. A cup left on a sill, a thumbprint on a latch. 3 X's you didn't ask for. Those are too many details. That evening, the weather turned like a face. The sea climbed itself into ribs without wind. The barometer hiccuped, up half, down a point, then spun its needle to the door and left it trembling. The air in the watchroom smelled metallic, the way the air in a train station smells when a storm is far away and already decided on you. The knock from below didn't come in 3s now. It came in a long, patient roll, the way someone who knows you are home will settle their palm against the wood and wait for you to remember manners. I went down, not to the door, to the landing above it. I sat on the step with my back against the wall and my boots braced. I won't, I said. My voice was fine in that space. No echo, no bravado to hide in. I won't, I said again, to the knocks, to the sea, to the rules, to the little marks in the varnish, to the one thing that was probably listening. I won't. The knocking stopped. The stone took a deep breath and let it out all at once. In the quiet, I heard something else. A voice. Not words. The shape of one. A syllable lifted to a question. A name that might have been mine if I allowed it. I stood up before I knew I had stood up. That is how you get taken. Not by being weak, by being polite. Back to the watchroom, back to the light. Wind the weight. Check the burner. When you have no power in the world, there is terrific comfort in a crank that does what it is meant to. At midnight, the logbook page shivered under my hand. Not a draft, the paper itself. A fly had gotten in somewhere. It crossed the page, crawled along Cole's 1416, tapped a leg at the pencil diagonal, and lifted away. It did not come back. A tiny life decided things and left me out of it entirely. I envied that. The lens turned. The room turned with it. Slow, slow, slow. In the glass, I caught the ghost of the stairs and the suggestion of an open door. Not the door behind me, the one in front of me that wasn't there. Inside that not door, 3 men in oilskins stood shoulder to shoulder, all turned 3/4 away, faces set toward the place where the sea would be if the glass were a window. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. They were not there. The glass slid on, and the room became a room again. I gripped the rail so hard my knuckles felt like other people's. "Keep the light," I said out loud to 3 ghosts that weren't. All right. On the 4th morning, the skiff came back. It should not have. There was no schedule that asked for it. The square boatman's head rose above the lip of the rock like a piece of the dock had come to see what all the fuss was. He shaded his eyes. "You alive up there?" "Alive," I called. "Senior boys?" "No." "You want a hand with the door?" "No," I said, more sharply than he deserved. He laughed the way men laugh when they meet a fool and don't want to own it. "All right, keeper," he said. "You holler if the weather goes wrong." "It already has," I said. He didn't hear me. The sea took the words and put them in a drawer. He idled off and left me with the rock and the tower and the weight and the knock and the tea and the marks in the varnish. I slept in the chair for an hour after he left and dreamed that water ran up the stairs like a dog and laid its head in my lap. When I woke, my knees were cold, as if something had rested there. By then I had made a plan. It wasn't good. Good plans require other people. I had a keeper's plan. It only had one rule in it. Do not leave your post. Everything else bent around that like iron around a magnet. I took the log down to the lowest landing and sat with my back to the mean door. I opened to a clean page. I wrote in the biggest hand I could make without turning it into a lie. "If someone finds this, wind the weight. Keep the light. Do not open for knocks in clear weather." We did not leave. We went where the knocking leads. If there is a choice, we chose. If there was not, we did what we could. Keep the light. It looked too simple when I finished. It always does. I tore the page out. I folded it twice and slid it under the big bar on the big door because some things are more human if you make your hands go through the motions of hope. Then I went to the little door. It stuck at first. I leaned into it with my shoulder the way Dawes taught me to lean into things without hurting them. The wood sighed like a locked throat relieved to learn it can still swallow. The gap widened an inch. 2. Water smell. Immediate. Old. Close. Not brine. Not rot. The smell of the underside of a stone your grandfather turned over when you were a child to show you that everything you fear also has a life. Behind the door is not a hall. Everyone imagines a hall. Behind the door is the meeting of tower and rock, a marriage that doesn't forgive. The space a shoulder might pass through if the shoulders were thinner and made of wanting. A channel of fitted stones dark with the condensed breath of stone itself. And at the end, a square of light as small as an envelope and as bright as a bare bulb. It moves when you breathe, as if your lungs were a wind and this light were a candle. I put my head into the space and my shoulders, one at a time. The air there is cold enough to rinse memory. It took mine and gave me back something thinner. The knocks came from nowhere you could name. If you tried to point, your finger found the wrong corner. If you tried to place it under your tongue like a rumor, it bit. 3. Pause. 3. I could have stopped then and called myself wise. I moved. The passage turned a shallow elbow. The light reset itself in front of me, the way it does when you're walking to a door that never wanted to be yours. A shape crossed it. Not a man, the idea of one. A shoulder and a cap and the angle of a head listening for weather. "Call," I said, and hated that my mouth chose a name when my head knew better. The shape stopped. The knocks resumed, but softer, like a hand laid to a cheek. It would be rude not to meet a hand laid to a cheek, you know. We are not made of iron. We are made of habits. Behind me, Far up the stairs, the lens turned. The light did what it was built to do. It went out into the day and called to things that understand calling. In the curve of the glass, for just a second, I saw the big door and the bar across it and the little folded page under it like a white fin. The image slid away. If you wanted to, you could say farewell then. I didn't. The passage ended at a mouth your mother would tell you not to put your hand in. Stone teeth, wet with old weather. Beyond, not water exactly, surface. A plane that held the light and refused the glare, like looking at a hard polished table you could drown in. The air chilled further. The knocks stopped. The quiet made a sound like, well. I crouched. I put my palm against the surface. It did not take my hand. It did not refuse it. It recognized me the way a dog recognizes a scent after years and years. Not with joy, not with grief, with certainty. I leaned. It gave. Or I did. The difference didn't matter after the first inch. There is a kind of cold that isn't temperature. This was that. The surface passed my wrist, my elbow, my shoulder. For a second, my cheek reflected back at me the way a boy looks up from a pond to check if his hair is right. Then I was inside of something that didn't have a word in any book I've read. Movement without distance, sound without air, below without beneath. If you do not like bad metaphors, do not go into spaces the world did not build. People say you see your life when you die. I saw gray marsh, the weight shaft like a backbone, the lens like an eye that had waited too long to blink, the big door, the little door, the marks under the varnish, the mug on the sill with the tooth scar, the butter knife pointing at the door, the log with too many jokes in it, 3 oilskins, 2 gone, 1 left, and 3 men between the lens and the glass, faces turned toward a sea that is not water. I did not join them exactly. You don't join. You fit. You pick up a tool someone else had to put down hot. I held, and the light turned, and my shoulders remembered what the tower wanted from me. It wasn't much. Show the shape to the ships. Answer no knocks in clear weather. Keep the rules you don't have to write down. From very far away, whose distance was measured in kinds of silence instead of miles, the mean little door shut, and the big door stayed barred, and the square boatman scratched his head over a cigar and decided to check again tomorrow. I am writing this on the watchroom desk because time is a circle here and a straight line out there, and somewhere an inch of wood holds both in the same grain. My hand looks like my hand. The pencil leaves marks that feel less like lead than promise. If I put this book down, it will be picked up. If not by me, then by the next keeper. If not by the next, then by the last. We did not leave. We locked the door from the inside because that is where we work. If you find the bar set, wind the weight. Keep the light. If you hear your name from below, it isn't us. If the horn speaks when the air is clear, put your back to the wall and remember that you are polite, but not a fool. When the weather is right, and it will be right more often than not, because the sea keeps its own appointments, you will smell iron in your tea. You will see shapes in the glass that are not you and are not ghosts. You will feel the tower insist. Let it. If the passage opens and you have to choose, you already know which way we went. There are storms you do not write the date for. You write the weather instead. You say, calm. You say, swell, moderate. You say, visibility fair. You say, knocks from below, intermittent. You say, door barred from within. You say, keep the light, and the light keeps you back. That is the whole of it. That is the mystery. That is the work. The sea will remember the day I arrived better than any ledger. It will remember the clean sky and the boatman's square question, and the way the ladder sang under my boots. It will remember the taste of the air in the hall under the little door, and the sound of 3 knocks that were not the ocean, and not a man, and not a story. It will remember because it keeps good books. If you come up the ladder and call, and I do not answer, Look through the diamond. See the bar. Feel the weight of what men set when they decide to keep the world exactly where it is. Then knock 3 times, not because I will open, but because you are polite. Wind the weight. Check the burner. Make tea you will not drink. Sit in the chair and let the tower say your name the way a place says anything. Softly, insistently, without language. I will be here. We will be here. Inside, where the door makes sense. Inside, where the light goes first.